Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Mack. Welcome to the fourth event in the spring 2024 iteration of the Popular Music Books in Process series, a collaboration between the Journal of Popular Music Studies, IASPM US, and the POP Conference. Thank you to my co-organizers, Francesca Royster, Antonia Randolph, Gus Stadler, Carl Wilson, and from a distance, Eric Weisbart. On February 19th, James Spooner and Chris L. Terry will be in conversation with contributor Joanna Davis Nageliget to talk about their new collection, Black Punk Now, published by Soft Skull Press. You can find the full schedule on the IASPM US website under the Journal tab, and previous recorded sessions of the Popular Music Books in Process series are archived on Eric's YouTube channel. Today, we're very excited to have Michelle Duma and Ben Apatoff here to talk about their respective 33 and a Third series books, Cardi B, Invasion of Privacy, and Body Count, Body Count. Michelle Duma is a Seattle-based writer whose writing has long centered on sex-positive intersectional feminism and pop culture. Her work has included columns on style, brunch, and cannabis, and has appeared in or on New York Magazine, MSN, The Huffington Post, Dame, She Shreds, VVM, and The Stranger. In 2015, she founded Seattle's first feminist publication as editrix-in-chief of Stacked magazine. Her first love is long-form music analysis. Duma's childhood goals were to live in New York City, become a music scribe, and marry Slash. She has so far accomplished 2 of the 3. Ben Apatoff is the author of Body Count, part of the 33 and a Third series, and Metallica, the 2495 book. His writing has appeared in The Quietus, Rolling Stone, Alternative Press, Loudwire, Ultimate Classic Rock, Metal Injection, Metal Sucks, The Daily News, The Deli, Electric Literature, Beyond Race, Outburn, BobMarley.com, MLB.com, and more. After the discussion, there'll be a Q&A, which Francesca will moderate. Please put your questions and comments in the chat as they come to you, and Francesca will find them there at the end of the discussion. And feel free to also post comments throughout the conversation. So now I'll turn things over to Michelle and Ben.
Hi, you want to start, Ben?
Sure, great. Thank you so much, Kim. That's awesome. And as you know, I love your book, so thank you. Michelle, wow, that was such a great book about Cardi B. I'm so happy to have had a advanced read of it. I guess first question would be, why Cardi B? You know, you write a little, and I'm going to paraphrase, you write about being sort of outside of the demographics. I'm wondering about like what's her sort of crossover to you? Why is that? It's a unique book for 33 and a Third, right? You said it's the newest record in the series. So
Yeah,
about what drew you to write a book about Cardi B?
sure. Well, I'm always attracted to women who are loud and edgy and opinionated and not afraid to be sexual and all this kind of like I was young. I'm old enough to remember a time before and after Madonna. So I understood once I heard her record. I came to her musically before I knew anything about her, like pop culture wise. I hadn't seen Love and Hip Hop. I'd seen a couple tweets, like the one I start the book with, "Let me fat in peace," how she responded to like pregnancy rumors. And I was like, this girl, I like her. And then I just happened to, I think I kind of roll it back. I'd been on kind of a musical fast. I wanted to take a couple years like off of the art of white men. I'd spent a lot of time like listening to guitar rock my whole life. And I was just like, this is not, I'm not really feeling this anymore. I was kind of y'all. And I was like, you know what? I just want to like do an art cleanse in a way. And I really fell into it. I tried to give up like all media of men, but I couldn't give up Prince. And so for a few years, like I was just in that and I was listening to lots of classic soul and old blues and just like trying to just listening to all that. And then Lizzo kind of slid in, you know how Spotify does, slid in there. And then one day when I was listening to her, a Cardi song came on. And I was like, who is this? This is everything like I kind of like about hip hop without the stuff I don't like, without the misogyny, without the just, she's a lot different than Nicki. I think Nicki's kind of like a product of patriarchy, and in some ways I could see right away that Cardi was subverting it. She was using like all these tactics like hyper femininity and like how she positioned herself in her videos. She's never in a submissive position to a man. Like even if it's offset, she's physically on top like all the time. And so there were all these little things. I'm like, this is really interesting. And then I pitched, well, I wrote one up for Holes Lived Through This, like a pitch for 33 and a third. And Courtney also used to be a dancer. And then the next one I had written up and pitched was on La Tigra, and Kathleen Hanna also used to be a dancer. So I'd done a lot of research about just kind of sex work and art and how, you know, women were kind of shunned for using that as a platform to pay for just to make art and music and all those things. And Courtney and Kathleen could never really overcome that. They were always getting questioned about it in their interviews, and they had to be super defensive. And Cardi was never that way. She was just like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I come with this fan base already, so I don't need you to give me approval. I don't need traditional gatekeeping. I don't need any of those things that have come before. And I'm just going to, you know, move kind of in my own way. And so I was really attracted to that. And and also that was, yeah, the first thing. And then once I started to write it, like I could feel like I was onto it. Like I'd taken a couple of years off of writing altogether, and I sat down with that pitch and was like, well, if I can do this, if I can write 3,000 words in 2 days, then this is meant for me. And by the time I got to the second page, I felt very confident. I was like, I'd hit this kind of point where I like bring things all back to an acrylic nail. And I knew when I did that, I was like, I think they're going to take this book. I knew that I had like kind of found my zone and how it was going to be. So that was, and they took it. So
Great.
it's the long of how I got to Cardi.
Great. Can you talk to me also a little bit about the pitching process? I imagine, you know, 33 and third just opened up for pitches.
Yes,
I imagine a lot of people are going to be tuning in or watching this later. Just, you know, what can I do for this? Can you talk to me about shaping that into the pitch and moving ahead with that?
Sure. This is my first book, and so I found the structure that they provide really helpful. Like I got kind of mathy about it and divided like the 30,000 words into 60, 500 word like blocks on a chart, and I crossed those off as I went. So it didn't seem very overwhelming. I think we all sit down and write 500 words. If you do that 60 times, that book is written, right? Or so it was like easier, and it didn't seem as daunting when I took it on that way. And you just have to have something you can listen to all the time and never be sick of it. I broke that Spotify, you're in her one top percent of listeners down to 0.0005 in 21. So I don't think anyone was listening to more Cardi than me in 2021. I don't know how that would be possible. So it, you know, you have to be able to spend, even if you've listened to it your whole life, I'd imagine you're listening to it in a different way. And then one thing that we both, when we kind of pre-talked about this, is a lot of people don't realize that you cannot quote any lyrics in this series. Like that is a copyrighted issue, just same as we can't play a sample behind us right now. So writing around those lyrics is going to be part of your process. And if you're trying to pitch something where you're going to try and break those songs down, where you cannot, unless you know that artist and they're going to give you like that full permission. And I know a lot of people probably go in with their pitch. I did anyway, you know, my chapters are going to be parts from the songs and all that. No, you're going to have to like roll it back. But I found like writing around the lyrics to be helpful. Like if you want color and you want zest, and I can talk about what she's saying as opposed to quoting her verbatim, which I think will work out for everyone and better, more interesting content.
Good. You know, you mentioned dancing a little earlier. You mentioned Courtney Love and Kathleen Hanna. And one thing you said in the book, something along the lines of this was not deemed an acceptable career path until very recently, until, you know, with Cardi B.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's brought other rap girls up from OnlyFans and made them rappers. And other, you know, girls are using that platform just to pay for all of their art in general. And they aren't facing that kind of blowback because, again, they come with an audience. Those people are already paying to see things, and they will follow them, you know, they will follow them through. Like Cardi started dancing and then she was hosting, which helped develop her social media platform and kind of moved her away from that work. But she's never, no way for her to like when we talk about all the blackmail and stuff, or the things that happened in the past with sex work, like there was no way that that could happen. She was just she came from that. It was everywhere. It was on Love and Hip Hop, which, so there wasn't any, like, this is just how it is. And so far for those girls, I mean, aside from the stuff like men are always going to, say, or people who are uncomfortable with sexuality will always kind of, have a problem with that. But I think in like a more mainstream way. And also that chapter, I mean, we just kind of walk through it. We're like, here's the celebrity sex tape, that gets us more acclimated to people, like seeing celebrities like in that point of just, undress, and like the comfort level that kind of gets us to where Cardi can be successful. And there are so many women too, especially like Nikki, who, they like feign sex work in performance or whatever. Like they'll take a stripper persona and then they'll like slut shame other girls, right? And that's not like Cardi's way either. I have started to hear, like when I listen to the new girls, them like talking about body count and stuff, and I'm kind of disappointed because I thought that was not going to be the way it goes, but it rhymes with a lot of stuff. So yeah. I think it might be more about that.
Right. Building on that point, can you talk a little more about the world that Cardi B has sort of mainstreamed or made room for? It's just in less than 6 years since that record has come out. And what are the sort of big changes that you've seen artistically, sociologically in the world from Cardi B's emergence?
Well, there's a wave of femme rappers after her. Like when I was listening and like trying to find the girls and like just kind of like the early like pussy rap origins, not going back to Trina or anything, but kind of like the recent bubble with like Megan and everybody. And I was like, okay, well, this is all coming to be, but I have to find it. I'm seeking it out. And then as 2017 happens and Bodak Yellow hits, and also we talk about in the book how there are no signed female rappers. Every major label at that point, like I went and Pitchfork did some really intensive research. They went through like every label, like Jay-Z and Drake and Rick Ross and all these men who are in charge of it were not signing women at all. In 2017, there were 3. That was it. And then, Bodak Yellow drops in August of 2017, and it's like the biggest song. It's 13 times platinum now. It's like it held up. And then there just started to it started to creep up, and I started to see more and more girls. And then it was just Spotify playlist of just, girl, like hip hop girls. And I was like, this is awesome. Like this went so far from being like a niche thing to just, and I think that like Cardi's part in that is she's very good about bringing other girls with her. Like her features, once she got into a position where she could choose who she was featured with, it's just been a string of really interesting girls making really interesting art. Like her song with Glorilla, great. Like she'll drop in and do a feature, but it's very matriarchal, like the structure. You'll see pictures of them like working on the Bongos video, and Megan is holding her kids while they talk about what they're gonna do. Like that isn't, like traditionally when you see like video production, all that stuff, it's, you don't see people's kids running around. It's so I really like that.
Good. Yeah. Your book, reading your book, you had it kind of reminded me of different, like theater, or like, this is gonna sound pretentious, or like James Joyce with this sort of like different voices coming in again. And when we talked earlier, you mentioned kind of podcasts as kind of an inspiration. Can you talk to me about writing the book that way with this sort of like chorus of voice? It's
yeah,
it flows very well, but just like a lot of different kind of voices kind of coming up and being raised, almost like documentary style. Can you talk to me about that?
well, I wanted to go deep on my research, and I wanted to present that information in an interesting way, because I think a lot of the times when her music and music of that genre, people are deriding it, it's because of like the content. They're like, this is too sexual, but there's a reason that there's, they're missing out on like the context and like the history of the reason why that is, or those sort of things. So I wanted to kind of work through that. But also this is like my shot to write a book, right? Like I don't know if I get to do another one of these. So I'm gonna do as many men writing before me have, and just wank all over that page. Like I'm gonna shoot my shot, and like this is all, like I'm gonna write this as well as I can write.
Mhm.
I want the flower, and it's like to do. So like that's part of it. Like I wasn't just gonna, like I could have, I mean, and the another good thing about the series is that you can do anything you want. There's a PJ Harvey book that's lesbian erotica. Like there's literal oral histories. There's people who are just pulling clips about an artist and like kind of lining that stuff up. And so there's a lot of ways to approach it, but I was like, I like writing like Elizabeth Wurtzel and kind of that stuff I grew up with. That's real essay, like narrative essay style. And so I wanted to do that with everything. I wanted to present the context of what we were going to go into before we started talking about it. Like, if you don't know anything about the female gaze and you don't know, like you kind of have to set that up before we talk about how it applies to that, because these books have to be written for people who love her, and they have to be written for people who know nothing about her. So you have to you have to find kind of that sweet spot in the middle where you're speaking to both those people. And you also want it to be an entertaining read, right? Like I want somebody to pick this up and be like, wow, I want, like I use a phrase like somebody got murdered. And here, like if you wanted to get Barbara Streisand got murdered. Like that's something I would say in conversation. And then we were also talking about like I wanted to feel like a podcast. Like when you go into a podcast, they're always setting up what's about to happen kind of in a narrative form before you move in. And I wanted people to feel like they could hear it in their head as they were reading it. So yeah, it is. I mean, I guess it's not a traditional like music writing, but in some ways it is, right? It's like what the dudes used to do when you got paid $2,500 to like write something when $2,500 was $8,000 and you could live off it for a half a year,
Right.
like that kind of thing. So I wanted to write that way
Great.
and just be,
Great.
yeah.
Well, on the note of your research there, what was the biggest or some of the biggest surprises that you found when you were researching the story?
Um, and there's a chapter that's really, it's like, um, we're trying to just talk about how another thing people deride in that music is that it's financially motivated. And so I went in and I was like, well, we need to understand that obviously Black women are making 64 cents on the dollar. And what it requires for them to like what people in society expect, like in Western presentation, is expensive. And if you can't get those things in like a way that's like of the system, when the system won't work for you, what's wrong with those girls wanting, you know what I mean, their cash and how they want to talk about it in their own way. So I like want to start there, right? Like I want to give people that information and bring them in. And so we talked about like then it starts with like just really strong examples of Black women just getting screwed in the music business, like
Mhm.
Aretha Franklin having to carry her money in her purse, Mahalia Jackson having to carry her money in her bra because they can't trust anyone around them to like hold their money. And that's Aretha Franklin. Like that's crazy. And Donna Summer having to sue Casablanca, even though she's like the queen of disco, to get, what's hers. And so when you set it up in that context and be like, this is expensive, and then them, singing about getting their cash and their money bag makes sense. Like it's not just, this is a song about money. And
Right.
so like there's layers to it, and there's more, about them taking like hold of those ideas and her presenting them in her own way.
Hmm. Great. Great. Um, Also, in putting the book together, can you talk to me a little bit about the interview process, about reaching out to people and who you got and how that went?
Oh yeah, I tried to, because I hit on all these different topics, and fashion is obviously one of them because she has such like a strong thing. So I tried to reach out to some designers, like Christian Siriano's people got back to me right away, and then within a day they're like, unless Cardi and Colin say yes, no. And I kind of loved it because I was like, yeah, they're gonna protect her, you know what I mean, in that relationship, and that made me feel really good. Like the girls and the gays were into it, and then the straight dudes were like, yeah, I'll talk about myself. Here's what I did on this record. And it was such like a noted difference of like who would respond and who would give me a quote. And I'm kind of like a production girly, like I am very interested in that. So talking, like I wanted that to be as included as all these narrative topics too, like how those beats were made, what did you use, like all of that, that stuff is important to me too. So like that is also weaved in like through that the narratives too. Like the music is in there too. It's not just like this is why this is this way. It's, it's a complete content. I would hope anyway. You read it. You're like one of the few people who have read it outside of like, so I would hope that there's as much, the music is spoken for. It's like the other topical elements.
Well, when you said earlier that you want this book to be for people who are big fans and who didn't know anything about the music, I'm in the latter, and I was hooked. So thank you for that.
Oh, good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's a great book, and it feels like it's going to do a lot of good too for people. I mean, just thinking about the newer records and artists like that have not gotten their sort of 33 style canonization to them. So
yeah, that was part of the reason to pick Cardi too. Like there are so many women who aren't represented. Betty Davis doesn't have a book. Kim doesn't have a book. Missy doesn't have a book. Like, so I feel like if Cardi's through and people see that she's in the collection, then maybe other girls who are kind of interested in that kind of music will feel like, oh, this is a good space for me. I can create here. This isn't like stodgy old white guys running this process, or, like I can do things that are more creative, or I can do things that are like, and on records that are important to me, even though they're not like the things that people might regard as important records, so
yeah,
even though they are obviously.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of creativity, you I kept a whole list of the different things that you went into. You mentioned the different styles of 33 and third books, and this one gets into astrology and infidelity in music history, and names for women's anatomy, and just all this. I'm just curious about how you picked the angles that you picked that aren't specifically the songs on the album, right? How did you pick the things that you connected to Cardi B?
Well, either like thematically in the song, like that's where I'm either drawing it from, or like a song like Through Your Phone, which was, about infidelity through the phone, but it's also like I kind of spin that one. Cardi is here because our phone and music and our music player merge, right? So we're going to start at the beginning of like when phones get their patent and when people get them in their house, and record players are almost on the exact same timeline. And so as we kind of move forward, those things are going to become one thing. And because they do, we get Cardi, right? And so if we're going to talk about a song like She Bad, where it starts that ass, that ass, that ass, then we need to talk about BBLs, and we need to talk about body appropriation and all those kind of things. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to work our way into the song. And Cardi and I are both double Libras. She's October 11th and I'm October 9th. So when I was reading Bodak Yellow, I was like, these are all the things in your little astrology of the day page that they say about Libras. And I was just like reading it verbatim with the lyrics of Bodak Yellow. So I was like, then I went to my friend who does this thing called Shorty Astrology on the internet. She's awesome. If anyone, and I was like, okay, Miriam, am I right? And she's like, yeah, I didn't even put this together, but so I got somebody who like knew to sign off on my own like research. And so I kind of like, let's talk about that as kind of lean in on this record that's like such a huge single, and everybody's kind of written everything about what it is as far as a piece of music and what it did culturally. And we can pull all of that stuff into, but I want to set it up. And I want to talk this whole book, I just want to talk about femme stuff. I want to talk about fashion. And I want to, and I want to talk about all of those kind of things. Like a lot of these books aren't really, I feel like, well, there's a great Janelle Monáe one and a Janet Jackson one and stuff, but they're not, as femme heavy. I just wanted it to be like, I just want girls to like revel in this and be like, I love this. I want to write books like this. And I think lots of young girls aren't familiar with like old school music journalism. We do this right, it's an art, right? Like we do it, it's as good as what it can be. It's the things like we're commenting on. So that's always the objective, right? To like make it as interesting as the thing that you're writing about.
Yeah, definitely. You also spoke a little earlier about being in the fraction of 0.001% of Cardi listeners on Spotify. How, after going through the trenches of writing a book about Cardi B and listening to Invasion of Privacy that much, how has the record changed for you?
I focus, like, I listened to it in a lot of different contexts. I had a really insane experience. We have a laser dome in Seattle where they like do laser concerts. They let me come in there and just listen to it by myself in the Laser Dome. So, and it's like has this huge wattage of speakers, and I was like, oh, this will be insane, but it wasn't mixed for that. Like those speakers are mixed for Pink Floyd, so that was an interesting listening experience. But I did hear different things in the record. Unfortunately, technology came out like right before I sent it in, where I could listen to the parts separately. So that's something you can't go into the studio and do unless you have like masters, right? And I wanted to listen to just bass lines. I wanted to just isolate vocals and all that stuff. And so I was able to kind of get that done, through little apps on the phone and stuff. So I'm always just listening for the little things. And there's still things that I hear. I think it's the same thing when you're reading your own work to edit, you just become blind, like ear blind or whatever. And then I'll like go back, and after I finished this, I needed some guitars. So I went like back into guitar music, and I've just kind of like come back because obviously I have to talk about the record now. So it's time to, but I hadn't, since 2018, there hadn't been a week where I hadn't listened to that record. Like it was intensive. And then of course, just line all the time and just breaking it down and stopping it, rolling it back. And, like you're going to spend so much time with like every note of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess also tying in, record is it's smashed a huge amount of records. It's gotten critical acclaim. It's irrefutably broken a lot of ground. Where do you see, she has not made a full-length album since then, where do you see Cardi B going from here? And tie onto that, and you can answer this however you'd like, where are you going? What do you plan doing with the book? What your next steps? So where do you see Cardi B going, and where do you see you going with this?
Well, I anticipate what's thing called CB2, or is noted like for years, but apparently she's back in the studio now, and I think my guts are that will be February or March, just with the other kind of like releases that are coming out. And then I also happen to know some people who are tour managers, and that is being discussed, like who's going to manage. So she's going out, so that record is coming, and I feel like she'll probably, I would say, do 2 or 3 more, but I also see her as like a Madonna. She's going to act. She's going to, she's going to be just a person. She's a personality, right? And when it comes to like who is the better like rapper, like Megan is a rapper, but Cardi is an entertainer, right? She's the whole, like, she does all the things. So interrelated to that, when I was doing my research, I came across this article where Fran Drescher said she would only reboot The Nanny if it was Cardi. And I was like, I love that. She's perfect for that. And that sat in my head the whole time I was writing the book. And then once I put it away, I was like, I'm still thinking about this. So I was like, I'm going to just write this. And so I wrote like a big, like 4-season treatment and my first like attempt at a pilot. And I just kind of taught myself. Like I just went and watched like the Cheers pilot 10 times, and I have a bunch of 30 Rock episodes committed to memory. So it was just like, okay, I know the math of like how to lay, this out. And so I wrote that, and that I will try and get that in front of Fran soon, because that, like, there's so many things in Cardi's life that lend herself to that story, like that makes it a natural kind of like flowing story. And she's the right age right now, and that's a good job for a mom with 2 little kids. Like you work on the show. So yeah, that's the thing I worked on. And then I also want to do a second book, but I think it's going to be like about music witches. It's going to be like femme-occult stuff, like crystals and astrology and all that stuff in popular music, and women who we like call witches in music, even though if they're not really, like how we appropriate that on like Courtney or Yoko or Stevie Nicks, and how they kind of turned it around for themselves. So I think that's what I'm going to try and pitch next.
Sounds amazing.
What are you working on then?
Oh, I've got a few ideas for a next book, or I've been thinking about I've got a bunch of stuff written down about Guns N' Roses, a bunch of stuff about Screamin' Jay Hawkins, who I've liked for a long time, who've never had the book I wanted to read. And but my dream, I don't want to jinx it, but my dream is to get Ernie C from Body Count to write a book with me. So he's such a great guy and such a fascinating guy, and I didn't get to have enough of his stories because, you know, I had to keep the book about body count, but he has stories about Sly Stone and Eddie Van Halen and Rob Zombie, and he's got this fascinating upbringing with his single dad, and the way he runs the band is interesting. So I would love him to do an autobiography with me, but we'll see.
Cool. Then we talked a little bit too about like things that were similar. We talked about Moral Panic, how Body Count set off a Moral Panic. It was
Yeah.
part of like the PMRC Moral Panic, and so was Cardi.
Yeah, you know, they're both very transgressive people in the mainstream, you know. To have a song like WAP get that big and you know, just and yeah, I mean, I don't know really another way to put it, is that you know, it still does feel kind of shocking, but it's also like very mainstream. She's you know, like a
Yeah.
huge song artist like that. And
Yeah, I think that the attempt of that song was literally to be like, I want to say the dirtiest thing I can and get it on the charts. Like, what can I say that will push this as far as I can push it? And
right.
it's chef's kiss perfect. I remember during the political protests, like in 2020, when you would just see crowds of people just yelling along with us. It was like such a weird thing to identify with like a political movement, but everybody
But
wanted to,
it
it was
is,
just like we will walk in the streets.
right? And you
So
can see
that
that.
was like super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, at first you're like, you know, really what? But then like the more you think about it, that makes perfect sense as a political protest.
Yeah.
Is there anything about
Especially now.
say it again?
Especially like in post row, like all
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff. I
Oh my
expect
God.
it to
Yeah.
be
Yeah,
everywhere.
we're always seeing how relevant that is for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I have not asked you yet about Cardi B that you think everyone should know? That
No, I mean she's not quiet. She doesn't speak. You know what I mean? Like if you want to know about her, you just have to. But she has been on a little social media break, which makes me also think that that record will drop soon. Like everything will. So it will be really interesting to see. I'm excited where she goes next musically. Like she has a lot of label support. She can kind of do whatever she wants. So it'll be interesting to see how forward it is. All the little teasers they're dropping of who we're supposed to be on it and stuff sound pretty crazy. So and all that stuff gossip until it actually happens. It will be. Yeah.
yeah, good. What would you say to you know, you talked about wanting more room for different kinds of writers for different kinds of music. I'm sure there are young people looking at the opening of the series right now thinking about that. What would you say to people who are thinking about writing a book about their kind of Cardi B equivalents?
Sure. On this platform, this will be funny to say, but you do not have to be a professional music critic or hailed by like the
Mhm.
academia of, criticism to write one of these. You can follow their guidelines, and if you have a take that's uniquely yours and that you think that you can, bring something that nobody else could bring to the table, then that's your record, and that's what you should pitch. And you should not be, you should like he said, you should just write that thing. You should just throw all of your in it and do it and
Right.
not worry about because there is so much room for if you want to write poetry about Morrissey or whatever, go ahead. You know what I mean? If you want to like write an opus to Ernie, just Ernie, it would be great. Like there's
Yeah.
well not 33 and a third, but yeah, maybe in the genre. I just want people to like, yeah, like to find their special thing that's cool for them. And yeah, like this happened to be a record that just came to me in a time in my life when I needed it too. So if you have one of those records, I was really intent on this not being personal, to never have the words like I or me in it. Because I think there's a tradition of music writing where it's like, these are my feelings. And I didn't want it to be that. But I also think there's room for that, right? Especially if you have a compelling story or a personal narrative that like flows with the right. That's
Yeah.
a different approach. Yeah.
No, there is, and that's actually something I noticed about both of our books too. Is that I think one way your book is unique is that I think most people wrote about records they found in their adolescence, which is something for me
Yeah.
and Bobby found. I think for most of the people write for 33 and a third, but also and I love those stories. I love reading about people like how you found the record that changed your life, how you love that album, but both of our books kind of left that out. Both our books definitely left that out. We don't have sort of
I saved it for this, like
yeah,
intentionally,
exactly,
because I
right?
do interview people all the time, and I was like, that is a story for when you have to do your 19th podcast. Like, I don't need to take
Exactly.
up my 33,000, 100 words in like with that.
Right.
So I was just like in a bad depression, and I was in a part of my life where I had to work like manual labor all the time. I was just doing that all day, and I was just on my grind, and I just found that like that was a good like that is kind of like what that record's about. It's just like getting through,
Right.
especially like Get Up 10 and those first songs. Like it's just, and I just listen to it so much. I am that way though. Like I will go in on there. I've heard Appetite for Destruction. I couldn't even count. You know what I mean? Like those, there are records that are like so. Holes Live Through This. I've heard so many times. I've heard those records more than I've heard this by far. And I've and I broke the Spotify thing for Cardi. So
Right.
I will, if I'm into something, I'm into it, and I'll
Well,
listen to it over and
I mean,
over.
it's fascinating because to write a book like this has to be a combination of like of loving the artist and having something to say about it. Like,
Hmm.
there's so, I mean, you mentioned Appetite for Destruction. I have listened to that record thousands of times. I mean, it might be my favorite from that era.
Hmm.
Or before we were on the call talking about the Grammys, like I've been enjoying the Joni Mitchell discourse, like, and I love her and I love reading about her and thinking about her and watching her. I also don't think that I have something especially smart to say there, right? I'm like, I enjoy
Right.
reading the discourse, but yeah, it's tricky to kind of find a book that like to find a subject that you love and also have a unique perspective on or something to.
Well, I think if you're always defending something, especially like I was, I felt like I was defending what I was listening to a lot. Like people were being really dismissive of it. And I was like, no, this is super cool. And you just don't know yet, you know? And so like I was just, so those things that people were dismissive, I'm like, I was having these conversations over and over again. And like I'd formed my debate opinions, about all those songs and like the different things that people would nag on her on and stuff. And so I had kind of those like things already outlined. I was like, this is what I'm gonna say about this.
Well, did you find, because you said having to defend her, and this is something that came up when I was doing body count, was that I often got pushback from people who are like, well, it's just a controversy, right? Like it's not, they're like, well, it wasn't like a good record. People only, people only like Cop Killer because it set off this firestorm. Did you ever get that kind of pushback too? That was like, it's just shocking. Like WAP is not like a good song. It's just
Yeah,
shocking.
I mean, I just say, it's not for you, probably. I mean, the people
Right.
who say it, it's not the target demo for that music
Mhm.
by any stretch of the imagination. But also, people just want to be dismissive of her because she was a dancer, because she speaks with a heavy accent, because of, all these things that are really don't have anything to do with
Exactly.
why. So yeah, and people just want to focus on that, and like I said, she subverts patriarchy, she makes people uncomfortable. So I like that, but not everyone does.
You had a good quote about that too, about calling hip hop as a boys' club is polite. It's a patriarchy. It was
Oh yeah, a patriarchy is accurate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
true.
like I said, the math was there. That's not me just going in and being like, I feel like this. I mean, I've always tried, that's another thing in the book. If I have some opinion, I try and back it up with, people who I feel like really, really know. Like, why should you listen to my opinion on this when I can get Angela Davis's opinion on this? Like, I will say
True.
my piece and then bring in the research and kind of like feel like backing it up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we both it's both the first book about the subject, right? That's the first Cardi B book, first body count book.
Yeah, I think there's some like paperback gossip books, but I haven't seen anything. There is an official biography, but also she's 30 years old. Like most people wouldn't have this at this point in their career, right?
Right.
I'm look That was another reason why the book is so narrative. Like this is just the beginning for her. Somebody else could come in and do a whole second half, right? So she's young and like things are still happening. And that was one of the challenges of having a young record, is that things were still happening with it. Like the stats were changing on it. She would, somebody would drop a song on TikTok and something from the record would blow up, and she's trending, every other day. And so there were all these things that were happening. Like while I was in the process, I finished that BBL chapter and she took out her butt implants. So I was like, okay, well then that, changes this conversation too, right? Like, and she's like, I'm anti-polymers now and nobody should get them. And so where we start from the beginning of her, feeling like she has to have them, to getting them removed, like that chapter was done before they were removed. And I had to go
Right.
back and be like, okay, things are still happening, things are still changing.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just got oh, okay. So oh, sorry. Let's got concluding thoughts on Cardi B. Just got a message to switch up the interview.
Oh, yeah, no, if we're ready for questions and stuff, we can, I feel good about it, like, right? We
Yeah,
chatted, or if you have anyone there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Let's jump on in. Christine, actually, you have a couple of questions to start us off.
Hello, I'm also grabbing a snack at the moment, but thank you. Yeah, thank you for this. So much to think about. I was kind of like live thinking in the chat. So two questions. You signposted Trina, so I just want to hear some more about this rendition of Pussy Rap and how it both builds on Trina and maybe is different due to historical context or where we are musically
I
at this
call it,
point.
yeah, I call it the Trina equation, because if you know the song Pull Over by Trina, like all the lyrics in that, she's just basically just kind of laying out all the like topics that will come to like define pussy rap. Like, can you twerk to this, right? And then how fat is your ass? Like all the things that kind of come up, you know what I mean, that we like celebrate or whatever. Like Trina is laying that out in 2001. And those girls just kind of come back, you know, like topically to that again. And so, yeah, I come between it. Like if you go through one of the songs, you just kind of check it against Pull Over. And if you do that, then you can say, I successfully made pussy rap. Right. Saucy Santana can make pussy rap. It just depends if you get like all the different things in the equation. You know, anybody can do it. So yeah.
Should I say my other question too, or do you want to do your first question, Francesca?
Oh, you can jump in, Chris. That's great.
Okay. And then I was thinking too about, I mean, I'm always thinking about hip hop becoming mainstream American pop culture, but especially this move from late 90s R&B with a rap hook or rap song with an R&B hook, and then auto-tune, and then singing rappers. And this album in particular, like she's singing, but then like Kalani's also on a song. So yeah, anything you want to say to that aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things she talks about and that she's proudest about in the record, and it's also something when people are like, you're just singing about pussy, she's like, no, actually every song on that record goes to a different place, right? You've got a song like I Like It, which is a commercial pop hit. The head of the label, Craig Hellman, like mixed that thing. Like he's in there getting like these samples, you know, there's making this very commercial poppy record. Then there's trap songs that are just simple, you know, just like her just on just kind of that minimal beat, you know, with a blown out bass. And so she's doing all these different things. She doesn't come out and just do one. I think that's one of the successes of the record. She's like, I'm going to sing a little, right? And just sometimes she's perhaps Selena or the strip club Mariah Carey, right? She's that girl. And sometimes she's the person I like to call arty Cardi, right? Where she's kind of like her most gaga and like Grace Jones. Like we'll see it later in Press and, you know, and like Moneybag and stuff. And that's like my favorite iteration of her. But she does so many different things. And then she has a whole Latin American market. Like she's one of the first, you know, women to like American women to rap in like Spanish and have a hit. And so she's, you know, she's doing all of these different things. She touches on all these different like bases. You know, she isn't out there just doing the kind of a one or not a, you know, one note, but like, you know, she doesn't stay on one topic. And there are some girls who do that. You know, their records are very like, we're gonna just stay within this ground. But Cardi's everywhere, and she's musically and like lyrically.
Excellent. That's really so interesting. And we have a couple of questions for Ben. One is from Carl. Yeah.
Hey, hi. This has been great so far, but yeah, Ben, we haven't gotten to hear too much about your book so far. So you might want to say something introductory, but I was wondering, you know, the particular vision of the way that hip hop met rock in body count is different than what we came to call rap rock later in the decade. And I wonder if you could talk about like that specific vision and whether it was kind of a dead end or whether it did have a legacy and like where you see its influence felt? So that kind of cluster of things.
That's a great question, and very much so. You know, it unfairly gets called a rap rock record because a rapper's the lead singer, but he really kind of does like a hardcore sort of like bark, kind of like Mike Muir from Suicidals or Ian MacKaye, Henry Rollins. Ice-T likes to say it's a rap record with it's a rock record with a rap mentality. So it's a hardcore record. It's this kind of amazing seamless blend of punk and metal, but the themes are hip hop themes. I like to say in the book that's the first like rock horrorcore record. You know, this hip hop subgenre that's general hip hop themes with like a horror movie twist to it, right? And it's and you know, Ice-T's got this kind of cinematic way of storytelling. I guess in regards to your question, I think that the fact that it's not imitated more kind of shows what a singular achievement it is, or imitated more successfully. I mean, it's such it feels like it should be very simple. And when Body Count, before their sort of comeback started about 10 years ago, when they tried to follow it up, they had trouble with that. But it's this kind of it's this incredible blend of styles that, you know, like I would it's one of the only records I'd put on most of my favorite punk records and my favorite metal records. Like, you know, I know why like punks like Slayer. I would never say Slayer is a punk band, right? Or what, but it's yeah, it's I think it's just a very hard thing to recreate. And another thing I say is that it's I don't think there's ever been another record in history that's the same combination of being so intellectually progressive and politically incorrect at the same time, right? Like it's so, you know, they take a stance for all these important things, like you know, they're talking about police brutality and white supremacy and, you know, censorship and mass incarceration. They're also chopping up their parents and having sex with KKK bitches. They're, you know, it makes perfect sense that Body Count is a band that performed with both Rage Against the Machine and with Guar, right? You know, they couldn't play together, but Body Count can play with the two of them. And so I guess I just think that I can see its influence on modern music. I also think it's a very singular achievement, I guess I would say. Mm-hmm. I love your book too, so thank you for writing.
Kim wants to know a little bit more about your start.
My start with Body Count, it's almost too perfect. Another kid played it for me in the school library, and I remember he handed me the headphones and was like, "You will not believe this," and I was shocked. The first song I heard was KKK Bitch. And I had just heard punk for the first time, so I had just gotten into like the Dead Kennedys and the Misfits, and was thinking like, I want to know everything about this. It felt very punk to me. You know, I'd never bought any hip hop, so this was my first time hearing a rapper's themes on a record. It was catchy, it was scary, it was funny. I loved it. I also there was not a lot about them in magazines or on the internet at that time. It was the late 90s, and I knew barely anything about the controversy. So the version my friend played for me was the one that did not have Cop Killer on it. It took about another year before I could find a used CD version that had that. But yeah, I really loved it because I loved the music, and I loved and it just did not, you know, cross my mind that this was something that the president didn't want you listening to. It was just a record that I loved the same way I loved, you know, Metallica and Slayer and things like that.
Thank you. Let me see. I believe Antonia, you have a question about femme identity.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I was thinking about Michelle's centering of femme performance and thinking about Cardi B, and wondering if she has any thoughts about other folks who centered their feminists and who came before Cardi. Nicki Minaj is the obvious comparison, but also going back to Salt and Pepper, is there a lineage of femme performance within hip hop that you can put Cardi into, or what are your thoughts along those lines?
In my research, one of the things I found and was noted from a few different sources is that original rappers, even up to like Salt and Pepper, were kind of doing just mild feminizations of what men were wearing. Like they were kind of had taken femininity out of the equation. And you'll notice like Salt and Pepper still have the big shoulders, right? And in my search, it comes to like Misa Hilton, if you're familiar with her work. Like she's a stylist. She's the one who buys the leopard bikini for Little Kim. And, you know, like they're frequent shoppers at the Pat Fields boutique, and they're like girls who are very into their, like, that's how they become friends. They're like, your style is cute, my style is cute. And they're like 17 and 18, and they're kind of coming up with like, that's what we would now consider like, that's a hip hop, you know, femme look. So I think it's Kim and Misa, you know, and then other women will come along like June Ambrose and stuff, but their approach is very different. I think for that first, like what we regard, especially with Kim, that's her and Misa Hilton. And I also, there's a lot of conversations. I know there's that famous interview with Kim and Bell Hooks, and we talk, like, I referenced that a couple times because Belle is not pro hyper femininity. She is like, you're just, you know, you're just appeasing the patriarchy, right? And Kim is only like 21 there, and she is not like gonna backtalk Bell Hooks. She just kind of like rolls with that. But but I noticed like that's different now. Those girls, you know, the posturate of your sexuality is like your own. There's a really good video for the Summer Walker song. You know, I think it's called That Bitch Your Ex for a reason, though. Is that the whole like name of it? But if you watch that video, those are girls who are being very sexual without pandering to the male gaze. You know what I mean? They're like having fun. She and Ginny Naiko are like dressed, they're dressed for themselves. They're not, you know, it feels very much that way in my reading. And because of like the 50 years of hip hop and stuff, I was able to find more about Misa and more interviews with her. And it sounds like those girls, you know, came up with that look themselves. Like, did men like it? Yes. Did Biggie pick that picture? Yes. But no man said to Little Kim, go put on that fur bikini. Those girls went to Pat Fields, and Pat Fields gave them the, you know, and they were like, we love it. And it was supposed to be like a very natural like pose for her and stuff. But that's what I always think of like is the core, right, of where it starts. Because those, the more they start to, the more women start to sing about sex, the more feminized their aesthetic becomes. I think that's kind of the line I found anyway.
Thank you so much. I wasn't femme
Yeah.
growing up, but girls in my elementary school and junior high school wanted to be like Salt and Pepper. So even though they might have been doing a twist on male performances of masculinity and feminizing it, it was all the rage among femme
Yeah.
identified girls of my age, even before Little Kim came along. So they were icons to
Yeah.
folks of my generation.
I think the way it was described to like was that it was like a softening, right? Like Salt and Pepper soften those kind of lines, those hard lines, and then we move just kind of as they get sexier, they soften, right? That was like what the information kind of found.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll ask.
there was oh sorry, you mentioned Bell Hooks, who was also an outspoken Ice-T fan. So she once said that she was more inspired by Queen Latifah and Ice-T than she was by modern academics. So those are the two things she wrote. And she reviewed his first book in We Real Cool.
Maybe Bell Hooks should be the Venn diagram connecting Cardi B and Body Count. But I was just wondering, as a free-for-all, what you thought about Beyonce as a kind of mass popularization of some of both the kind of sexual politics of Cardi B, although Cardi B herself is massively popular, and the critique of the police also, you know, and in her work supporting Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh,
you
go
guys,
ahead.
Michelle, you had something, or you had?
No, go ahead.
Oh, it's interesting because you just brought back. I interviewed Rhonda Lord, who's the police union chief, who really led the fight to get the song removed. And he brought up Beyonce in our interview as a sort of connection, and in terms of saying that basically I don't want to misquote him. He said basically about that he thought that his protest against Ice-T won, basically, that he was able to stop that and like boycott the NFL, boycott Beyonce after formation has not worked. I think that yeah, they both are. I think the subversive in the mainstream aspect applies in that, you know, you can see that Ice-T is on a Cheerios box. He does commercials for Car Shield, and you know, when I see Body Count, I don't think, oh, I just think, you know, I interviewed Duff McKagan about Body Count, and he said, you know, they're one of the only bands I've seen be threatening on stage, and even though I know these guys, and even though they're my friends, they take a step back, like, what's going to happen? They're scary on stage. And I think that Ice-T kind of walks that line well, where he can be a beloved television actor on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and when he's in a grimy club playing hardcore punk songs, you're thinking like that's a badass. You're not like that's a commercial guy. I think that Beyonce can do that too, and that she can be one of the most popular figures in the world and do something with Formation at the Super Bowl that offends people and pisses them off. She's not she doesn't seem to play it safe. The new record doesn't seem like it's playing it safe. The country turns. So yeah, in terms of being just an irrefutably mainstream figure who's a subversive, yeah, that's true.
Cool. Kim, it looks like you have another question.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. And I was just curious about your interview subjects, because you interview a lot of people in this book and a wide range of people. And I'm just curious, how did you make decisions about who you wanted to talk to? And was it difficult to get some of the people to talk to you? You know, particularly the rock musicians, the folks in law enforcement. Like, how did you get people to talk to you?
It was difficult. I cast as wide a possible net, so there were I just tried everybody I could, and you know, I mean, sometimes I'd get shocked. I was shocked that Jean-Claude Van Damme talked to me. That was a surprise, but you know, I probably my biggest regret was Tom Morello, who I really tried to reach out to. You know, I know that he's super famous, but you know, he loves social justice type stuff, and Rage got their break opening for Body Count. He said that was like our big break. It's like our 5th or 6th show, and actually, Ice-T just inducted them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and told that story about seeing young Rage opening for Body Count. So so I tried him a few times, and his people very politely told me no. But yeah, I was Ice-T was kind of hard to get, as you can imagine. But yeah, I got some of my biggest heroes. I got Henry Rollins and Jello Biafra and Ice-T, Ernie C, all the current Body Count guys. Shawnee Sean, who's their hype man. Vernon Reed is wonderful, as you know. Corey Glover, Angelo Moore, Max Cavalier from Sepultura. Chuck D was great. Darlene Ortiz, I don't know if you remember her from. She was Ice-T's partner for the first sort of 15 years of his rap career. She's he likes to have his partner be part of the business, as I think you can see with Coco. Like, and Darlene was in his albums and music videos, things like that. She was wonderful. Ron was very helpful, the policeman. I guess in terms of interviews, one thing that I noticed is that people tend to open up a lot more when they're not talking about themselves. You know, I interviewed Max Cavalier years ago talking about Sepultura, talking about Soulfly, and he's very like, oh, professional, you know, here's the new song, here's about. But for Body Count, like, dude, Ben, let me tell you my Body Count stories, Ice and Ernie. But yeah, the people were mostly people seemed eager to talk about Body Count. You know, they love Ice-T. He's he's got incredible people skills. The people at Time Warner who I talked to remembered him very fondly. He really hustles. His Heidi, who co-wrote his first book, she's very smart and wonderful. She yeah, I guess everybody had a good word about Ice. Even you know, Ron, who tried to shut him down. I talked to Juan Williams, his conservative pundit. He used to debate on TV, but yeah, it was great. You know, I mean, I can talk to you about anyone you're curious about. Like Henry Rollins was kind of intense. You know, he was very, you know, yes, Ben, no more than 5 questions. But everyone at Jello is kind of mild minute talk. Vernon is so smart and lovely. I love speaking with him. Ernie is fascinating. He's everybody said about Ernie leading up to the book. And for people who don't know, Ernie's kind of like body counts Keith Richards. He's like the guitarist, co-writer with Ice. They're high school friends. The whole band went to high school together. And Ernie is the sweetest human being. Everybody said you're gonna love Ernie. He's so nice. He's so cool. He's so friendly, and he is. He's very cool. But he's also the boss, right? And you talk to him more, and he hustles. He gets people to show up to rehearsal. He gives out report cards on how people are doing. He fires people. He's got a sense of competition. So kind of the way you hear about like band dynamics with like Bruce Springsteen or Dave Grohl, he's got this like deserved nice guy reputation, and he's also very focused and hard work. One person I talked to said, Ice-T has 3 other jobs. He can't be there to get those guys to show up into rehearsal. And Ernie is very like that, where he's just like the loveliest guy, but he's very much like a band director. So but anyway, yeah, it was a dream come true to talk to, Chuck D said Body Count's the scariest band in the world. I could have not asked for a better endorsement from that. Yeah, it was Gibby Haynes gave me this long weird talk about from Butthole Surfers, Doc Coyle from God Forbid. Yeah, it was amazing to just talk to your heroes like that.
Thank you.
Well, this is such a terrific conversation. I forgot to say thank you to both of you for
Thank
the
you.
Beyonce
for
question
having us.
too. Thanks to all of you for coming, and we just wanted to just give a round of applause to Michelle and Ben, and also to invite everyone to come next week on the 19th, where we'll be hearing from Chris Terry and James Spooner about Black Punk Now, an amazing anthology. So please come. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.